All right, let's look at some of your feedback from the last week. Friday feedback featuring emails, YouTube comments, Twitter replies, subreddit posts, and all sorts of other ways that people communicate with us. You can always email info@davidpakman.com, but your posts and commentary on any of our platforms might be selected. We'll start with some criticisms. These are not exactly the most classy criticisms. John wrote in and said, do Alvin Bragg and David Pakman watch 3 or 4 hours of porn every day of their miserable lives? Get woke, go broke. Let's go, Brandon. Now, many of you would say, David, there's nothing here to actually address. You're not right, though. Get woke, go broke. As Farron Cousins so beautifully explained last week, this idea that, quote, getting woke makes you go broke really doesn't seem to be accurate. And in fact, we looked at some very interesting polling data down from Florida, which shows that despite the concerted effort and attack campaign by Ron DeSantis and other Republicans against wokeness, most Floridians and most Americans actually agree with the fundamental underlying reality of wokeness, which is I'm aware of problems in society and that it would be great to fix them and this sort of thing. So that it actually does seem that wokeness is winning. I addressed that in a segment a few weeks ago as well. As far as the other stuff, let's go Brandon and Alvin Bragg's habits or whatever. I don't know. Maybe go ask someone who cares about that stuff. Next email is from Mauricio, who wrote in about progressives and firearms. This is a very interesting email. It says, hey, David, I'm a U.S. Air Force veteran with experience with a variety of firearms. I own a few guns, mainly for recreational purposes, although there is a self-defense element. I consider myself a progressive, although I try to be rational and like to hear other perspectives to get to the root of issues. There are a few things I'm interested in your perspective on. What is your perception of progressive gun owners? Is this something you would encourage, discourage, or are neutral about? Is there any message you have for liberal gun owners? Well, I have many liberal gun owning friends. As I've said before on the show, I don't really talk about my ownership or lack thereof of firearms. I don't see any reason to necessarily talk about it. I've opted not to mention whether I do or don't own firearms. But one of the things I have said before is I would like the entire situation around firearms to be different. It should be much more expensive. Training and licensing should be much more extensive. You should be required to have insurance if you have firearms. There should be more limits on what firearms people can buy, and in particular, people under age 25. I've given all that list, and if I were a firearm owner myself, I would be more than willing to subject myself to all of those requirements as well. I would prefer there be way fewer guns in circulation, and dramatically so. Given the status quo today, I don't love the idea of the right wingers being the only ones with the firearms. Like, that doesn't sound good either. And it's not about government tyranny, because I think that that's quite a silly argument. But it's, if you zoom out and you say there's 400 million firearms in this country, do I want 370 million of them in the hands of right wingers, including a lot of right wing nuts? No, that doesn't sound particularly good. So I get that this is sort of like a race to the bottom type thing. Well, so if the liberals get the guns, then I get it. Believe me, I get it. Given where things are, I don't want the right wingers to be the only ones with the guns. Call me crazy. Next email is from James, writing about 2024, and says, given both Biden's and Trump's ages come the next election, there's a real possibility that either one or both could have to pull out due to ill health or worse, pass away last minute. What chaos do you feel could follow? Thanks, Jim from Ireland. Yeah, listen, statistically speaking, it is more likely that people in their late 70s or early 80s will die than someone who's 45. Statistically, that is absolutely the case. Whether this is likely, we looked at actuarial tables, looking at Joe Biden and Donald Trump's ages, and it is still more likely than not that they will survive to the next election. But there is no doubt that if either is or both were the nominees, and if either were to die, close to the time of the election, or even imagine between the election and the inauguration, it would be chaotic. And this is less about the law and more about, I mean, listen, if Trump's winning by 4 and November 1st, 2024, he dies and Republicans scramble and they put in, I don't know who, hard to imagine a scenario where I don't know who actually wins. Same thing would apply to Joe Biden. So I think that that would be the most likely outcome, that if one of the candidates, if a nominee were to die at a very late stage of the campaign, it's unlikely that whoever replaces them is going to win. That I think is the most likely outcome. VMit wrote in and said, sorry to hear that you don't have a channel anymore, about the YouTube channel. I also heard about this from John, who says, is it true you got kicked off YouTube? No. So several weeks ago now, we did an April Fool's joke saying the right-wing mob won and I lost my YouTube channel. Now, the truth is you can't really lose your YouTube channel or get kicked off. You could get banned from YouTube for publishing content repeatedly that's in violation of YouTube's terms and conditions. But it's an important thing to remember that they can't really take your YouTube channel from you or shut it down. And I am really thrilled to be able to say that actually the channel had its best month in a really long time in March. April is looking incredible. You know, not long ago, I had the goal of saying I want to steadily get 1 million views a day on YouTube. Steadily, not just like, oh, here's a good day, we got 1 million, but we're averaging way fewer. We've recently been averaging close to 1.5 million views per day on the YouTube channel, which is stunning. And I have only you to thank. So fortunately, the YouTube channel is alive and well. Let's look at a YouTube comment. This one's from TharCX4UQ, who says about the North Carolina elected official who switched party from Democratic to Republican. As a politician, you shouldn't be allowed to switch parties midterm. You should only be allowed to do it when running for re-election. That way the voters know who they are voting for. It's an interesting idea. Understand that you would, of course, have to announce that. You could be a Democrat. If you announce that you're running for re-election a year before the election, you would be announcing then, I'm running as a Republican. So you're still sort of making it known just as early, and you could still vote however you wanted. So while it's an interesting idea from Thar, I don't know that in practical terms, it really solves the issue that I think they're getting at. Feedback about last week's guest hosts. The good news, as I mentioned on the bonus show on Monday, is that almost everybody who wrote in about last week's guest hosts, which included producer Pat, Luke Beasley, and Farron Cousins, almost everybody who wrote in said, I liked at least one of them. And that's a really great thing. Michael says Pat and Luke did the best jobs of handling the show, hands down, Pat being the better of the two, but both were more true to your demeanor. I would much rather see these two guest hosts alternate days, assuming it's difficult to prepare daily. So that's Michael. Stephen wrote in and said, providing feedback that I much prefer Luke as a host. The reason for this is that I watch your show for political commentary with a progressive touch. Farron Cousins comes off as a left-wing preacher, and it's very off-putting. His vibe just doesn't match the show, you or Pat with 2 T's. So a lot going on spelling-wise, but a very interesting bit of feedback. And then other people wrote in and said, Farron's the only one that I watched. Other people wrote in and said, you know, the problem with Farron and Luke is they have their own channels. So then I end up seeing they cover the stories and then they cover them for you, and it doesn't make sense. But the whole idea was something for everyone. And I would call it an unmitigated success. But we'll keep trying different formulations in the future. Lastly, a post from Reflex Point on the subreddit, who says, I was impressed with Gavin Newsom. I get the feeling he's gearing up to be in line for a 2028 run or even 2024 if something were to happen to Biden before the election. I think this interview he had with Brian Tyler Cohen was very good and worth watching. He has a fighting spirit that I think Dems need, and he's not afraid to take the fight to the right and put him on the defensive, even if it's not him We need someone that is not afraid to be confrontational with Republicans. Brian Tyler Cohen's interview with Gavin Newsom was excellent. I recommend you check that out. And I tend to agree. And as I've said before, I don't think Gavin Newsom is the be-all, end-all of the progressive politician of the future. I think he has policy areas where I agree, policy areas where he's sort of like, okay. But the critical thing about Newsom is he is willing to be ruthless in the way that the left should be ruthless when it comes to these Republicans. That's a very good thing. Not everybody's willing to do it. So I think Newsom is a very interesting guy, although I don't think he is the uber progressive. But there are many considerations when we think about who would make a good nominee. How they would handle attacks from Republicans is an important part of that. What would their demeanor be in debates? Important part of that. All of those things, very, very interesting candidate. Potential candidate. He hasn't announced that he's running. Send me your thoughts, info@davidpakman.com. Post to the subreddit or leave a comment on YouTube or whatever the case may be. Please remember to ensure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. We are pushing our way slowly to 2 million subscribers. And also remember that much of our content is available in Spanish at davidpakman.com/Spanish. If you know anyone who would like or benefit from this content, but would better consume it in Spanish rather than English, let them know about davidpakman.com/Spanish. We will see you on the bonus show in mere moments.